Hello, my name is Kim, and I'm here to tell you a spooky story. Make sure to share your recent scary encounter in the comments. And maybe subscribe to the channel. Anyways, let's dive into the horrors of Camp Nevermore. Previously on Camp Nevermore, Zach Moreno's summer took a terrifying turn the moment his bus veered off the map. The forest began to loop. His phone froze. And the other campers? Silent. Staring. Wrong. When the bus finally stopped, Camp Nevermore greeted him with peeling cabins, strange whispers, and a counselor whose smile seemed stitched on. Zach's new cabin mate Jules claimed the camp was a nightmare factory, but he might not be joking. Then came the first night. Something with antlers emerged from the woods, faceless, silent, watching. It circled Zach's cabin. It whispered his name, and in the window, it left a warning. Zach hasn't even had the lemonade yet, and already, something knows he's here. And now, Chapter 2. The rules are different here. Zach woke to sunlight. Real, golden, butter yellow sunlight, pouring in through the dusty windows of Cabin 3, slicing through cobwebs, warming the old floorboards like nothing strange had ever happened. Birds chirped outside. Chirped, as if last night hadn't existed. He sat up slowly, waiting for the pressure in his chest to return, for the faceless figure to still be standing outside the glass. But there was nothing. Just trees. Wind. A squirrel sprinting across the roof. Zach blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, and turned to Jules, who was already dressed, crouched over his notebook and writing like a man possessed. Morning. Jules said without looking up. You sleep okay? Zach stared at him. You're serious? Yeah. I had a dream I was made of popcorn. Not ideal, but better than that one where I melt through the floor and become a fog bank. Zach threw off the blanket and stood. You didn't hear anything last night? Like walking? On the roof? Around the cabin? Voices. Jules paused his scribbling. Nope. Though I did wake up to you whispering in your sleep. You kept saying, it's watching. It's watching. Very poetic. Zach's stomach turned. He stepped to the window and looked out. Same forest. Same mess hall. Same dusty gravel path. But now it was lit like a postcard. Charming, harmless, even pretty. Sun filtered through the trees in soft orange beams. Someone somewhere was singing a camp song out of tune. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The key chimes clinked gently in the breeze. No scratches on the door. No footprints in the dirt. Not a single broken branch in the clearing. But the note was still there, tied to the post with red string. Zach untied it, unfolded it again. Don't drink the lemonade. Same letters. Same pencil strokes. Same warning. He scanned the tree lean. Nothing moved. Jules stepped out behind him, holding his notebook and chewing a granola bar. Look, dude, he said around a mouthful. I get it. First night is always weird. Camp beds are awful. The walls creak, and the woods make coyote sounds that sound like babies crying. But don't stress. Daylight is safe. Mostly. Zach turned to him. You really think that thing last night was just my imagination? Jules raised a brow. I think if something with antlers was trying to eat you, it probably wouldn't bother knocking first. Zach wasn't sure whether that was supposed to be comforting. A bell rang in the distance. Clear and sharp. Jules straightened. Orientation time. Come on, let's go watch Reed pretend to be a person. Zach hesitated. The camp looked normal. The birds were chirping. Jules was chill, but the hair on the back of his neck was still standing up. He tucked the note into his hoodie pocket and followed Jules down the path. The camp was pretending to be normal, and Zach wasn't going to pretend with it. The clearing behind the mess hall looked like it had been set up for a commercial. A wooden podium sat dead center, flanked by 2 hand-painted banners that read Welcome Campers, in cheerful colors that had faded unevenly. Rows of mismatched benches curved out from the podium in a wide semicircle, all facing a tiny, elevated platform like they were about to witness a tiny courtroom trial. The other kids had gathered already. They sat quietly, perfectly spaced, hands in laps or folded neatly over knees. Too neat, too still. Jules and Zach slid into an empty bench near the back. "Smile and wave," Jules whispered. "The cameras might be watching." "What cameras?" "Exactly." Zach didn't know what that meant, but he didn't like it. Then came the counselors. 4 of them stepped out from the trees, all dressed in crisp khaki uniforms and green sashes, like old-fashioned scouts. They marched in step, literally. 1-2, 1-2. Their faces were too blank, too clean. They looked like someone had built them from memory, not biology. Then Counselor Reed followed, arms outstretched like he was embracing the entire camp. "Good morning, Nevermore campers," he called, voice echoing strangely off the trees. What a perfect day for a little tradition. And what's more traditional than the rules? A few campers clapped politely. Reed clapped once, crack, and the sound made Zach flinch. "Now," Reed said, beaming as he pulled a clipboard from nowhere, "we have a few teensy-weensy things to go over. So, let's all listen close. These aren't just guidelines, campers. They're your lifelines." He said it like it was a joke, but he didn't laugh. The other counselors stood at attention behind him, hands clasped, not blinking. Reed's smile widened somehow. "Rule number 1, he said, pacing in front of the podium. "Never, ever enter the forest without a counselor. Not even to chase a squirrel. Not even to find a cool stick. The forest gets confused when campers wander." Zach's stomach clenched. "Rule number 2, Reed said. Stay out of the lake after sunset. We don't want a repeat of," he paused. His smile twitched. "Well, just don't go in. Trust us." A murmur ran through the campers, quickly silenced by one look from the female counselor on the left. "Rule number 3, Reed continued, now slower. His voice dropped a register. "If you hear your name whispered from the trees, do not answer." Zach's eyes darted toward Jules. He looked impressed. "Rule number 4, Reed said, and now his grin had stopped moving. His lips stayed stretched, but the muscles behind them froze. "If you see a version of yourself walking around camp, don't speak to it. Don't follow it. And do not ask it questions." That was met with silence. Total silence. Reed's voice turned almost sing-song. "We call those the echoes. They don't mean well." He paused, looked out over the campers, and then said the entire list again. The exact same words, the same rhythm, same joke about the squirrel, same dramatic pause before, "Trust us." Zach felt something cold crawl up his neck. The second time, no one blinked, except Jules, who leaned close and whispered, "Okay, that was not for us. That was for something listening." Zach wanted to leave, right then, right now. But Counselor Reed's eyes flicked straight to him, just for a second, and Zach knew, somehow, if he stood up right now, they wouldn't let him sit back down. The campers were dismissed like soldiers. One sharp whistle from Reed, and the rows emptied silently, everyone filing back to their assigned cabins or optional fun stations, as one of the 2 cheerful female counselors called them. Some kids drifted toward the lake, others toward the craft shed, all without speaking. "I swear they all have Bluetooth mind control chips," Jules muttered as they walked. Zach didn't laugh. He was still stuck on the last thing Reed had said. Not with his voice, but with his eyes. That single flicker of recognition. Like Reed knew what Zach had seen. Or what had seen him. Zach slowed down beside Jules. "So, echoes, huh?" Jules didn't answer right away. Then, yeah, that was new. Or, at least, new to say out loud. "What do you think they are?" Jules shrugged. "Camp lore. Scary stories to make kids behave. Except the counselors are usually the ones pretending everything's fine, right? So when they acknowledge the weird stuff, that's when you worry." Zach frowned. "But what are they?" "Best guess." Jules flipped open his notebook as they walked, scanning doodles. Copies. Glitches. Maybe the forest makes doubles. Tries them on. Learns your patterns. Like a mirror, but with teeth. That's your best guess? Jules nodded. Or maybe they're campers who got lost and came back wrong. Or they never left at all. Either way, rule 4 is solid. Don't talk to one. They reached the cabin. Jules pushed open the door. Inside, it was still warm with sunlight and smelled like pencil shavings and old wood. Jules collapsed onto his bunk and started sketching what looked like a deer made of tangled sticks. Zach sat on the edge of his bed. Something was poking into his back. He reached behind the mattress and pulled out a wadded-up sock and a rock-hard granola bar. Deluxe accommodations, he muttered. Then, very faintly behind him, sock. He froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. It sounded like it was traveling through too many trees, too many walls, to reach him. But it was his name. Same as last night. Same sound. Jules, he said quietly. Jules looked up. Yeah. Did you hear that? Jules cocked his head. Hear what? Zach didn't answer. He stood up slowly, turned, and looked out the window. Nothing. Not even a squirrel this time. Never mind, Zach said. He sat back down. His name still echoed in his ears. Zach crouched beside his bunk again, pretending to dig through his bag. What he was really doing was trying not to look directly at the bed frame, at the carving, but it was like trying to ignore a loose tooth with your tongue. Eventually he turned and looked. The name was still there, in the slat just above where his pillow would go. Zachary Moreno, 1974. Not scratched, not written in marker. The letters had been seared into the wood, blackened at the edges. Perfectly formed, almost like a branding iron had done the job. And the year, 1974, was too far gone for a prank. Too random, too precise. Zach reached out and touched the wood. It was warm. He yanked his hand back. Jules dropped down next to him. Yeah, you saw it. You knew it was there? Sort of. I checked the bunks for anything cool while you were asleep. Found the usual, satanic panic scribbles, a threatening limerick, some gum fossils, and that. You didn't think to mention it? Jules shrugged. I figured you'd see it eventually. It's your name after all. Weird, right? You ever time travel? Are you a clone? Reincarnated ghost, maybe? Zach stood. This isn't funny. I'm not trying to be funny, Jules said, standing too. Okay, maybe like 20%. But seriously, camp plays tricks. I've heard stories about the woods, the lake, the bunk carvings. Most of them don't match up, but every version ends the same way. Zach narrowed his eyes. How's that? No one ever really leaves. Zach stared at him. You're not helping. Jules smiled grimly. Good. I'm not trying to. Zach turned back to the bunk and looked at the carving again. Up close, the scorch marks curled slightly around the letters, like the wood had resisted being branded, like it knew the name already. And somehow that made it worse. Zach sat on the edge of his bunk for a long time, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might blink first. Outside, the afternoon sun had started to tilt, shifting from gold to the dull copper of approaching dusk. The kind of light that looked nice in photos but always made Zach feel like time was about to run out. Shadows stretched across the cabin floor, long and quiet. Dust danced in the air, catching the light like lazy snow. Jules had gone out to investigate the slushy machine in the mess hall, claiming it was definitely radioactive. Zach was alone now, or mostly alone. The cabin creaked sometimes when no one moved, the kind of creak that sounded too heavy, like a second pair of footsteps trying to sneak in sync with the first. He could hear the faint rustle of trees outside, the occasional call of a bird, the flutter of something small against a window pane. Normal things. Too normal. It made last night feel distant. Maybe he had imagined it. Except the carving was still there, and so was the note. And now something else was wrong. There was something under his bed. Not a shape, not a sound, just a presence. Like air that had folded around something too quietly. Zach leaned down and peeked underneath. At first, all he saw was dust and splinters, and a missing sock that definitely wasn't his. A few old gum wrappers, a green marble, someone's lost pencil case, and then, tucked deep against the far wall, half hidden behind the wooden crossbeam, was a corner of something pale, something flat, paper, an envelope. Zach's skin prickled. Every hair on his arm stood up like a tiny soldier. He reached for it slowly. His fingers slid over the floorboards, gritty with dirt and spiderweb threads. Just a few more inches. Whisper. So soft he didn't register it at first. Zach. He froze. The envelope sat still, unmoving. He reached again. Whisper. This time closer. Not in the room. Not outside. Under the bed. Right in front of him. You came back. Zach's heart slammed once against his ribs. He sat bolt upright, cracking his head on the underside of the top bunk. Pain sparked across his skull, and he stumbled backward, catching himself on the frame. He stared at the empty space beneath the bed. Nothing moved. The envelope was gone. Zach blinked, crawled forward again, too afraid not to check. Empty. Only the dust, the marble, the gum wrapper. No paper, no voice. But the words were still echoing in his head, as if someone had whispered them directly into his ear. You came back. He backed away from the bed, shaking. Had someone been under there? Was someone still there now? He thought of the echoes, the forest, the rules. Then he thought of something worse. What if it wasn't someone? What if it was him? Chapter 3. Lost and found and lost again. They weren't supposed to be here. Zach knew it the second his foot crossed the rotting, no entry, sign half buried in ferns and dirt. The letters so faded they looked like scars more than warnings. The path beyond was narrow, sun-dappled, and lined with dense undergrowth that swallowed light like it was hungry for it. Perfect place to avoid supervision. Also the exact kind of place where, in any movie, the kid who walked in alone didn't walk out. Okay, Zach muttered. Explain to me again why we're doing this. Conspiracy proofing, Jules said, pushing past a low-hanging branch like he was leading an expedition. Data collection. Active fieldwork. You can't just believe the stories. You have to test them. I was kind of hoping to survive camp without triggering a government cover-up, Zach said. Jules stopped and looked back with a grin. That's what they want you to think. Zach rolled his eyes and followed him into the trees. The first few minutes felt almost normal. Just a dusty trail lined with mushrooms and the occasional forgotten chip bag half buried in the dirt. Nothing screamed supernatural doom yet, but the light, it changed quickly. The further they walked, the more filtered the sunlight became. What started as golden beams turned thin and silvery, like moonlight passed through water. The trees grew closer together, the air cooler and damp. Zach rubbed his arms. Jules kept up his commentary. You know, I've been trying to map out all the trails, but they don't line up. The ones they show on the camp map don't exist in real space. I think the forests wait. Look at this. He crouched beside a cluster of mushrooms, fat, pale, and veined with red. Not the usual backyard kind. Definitely poisonous, Jules said. Or psychic. Possibly both. Zach crouched beside him. That one's breathing. No, it's not. It is. Look closer. They both leaned in. One of the mushrooms gave a slow pulse, like it was drawing in a breath, then exhaled in a faint puff of damp air. Zach stood up fast. Okay, trail explored. Let's go. Jules was still scribbling in his notebook. Do you feel that? What? Jules stood slowly, turning in place. It's quiet. Zach listened. No birds. No wind. Even the insects had gone still. The silence was deep and total, like a blanket smothering every sound. And that's when Zach felt it. A change. Subtle, but sudden. The air around them had shifted, as if something large had turned its attention toward them. Not moving, just noticing. Zach's voice came out quieter than he meant it to. This is a bad idea. Jules nodded, still scanning the trees. Yup. Zach turned back toward the trail, but something about it looked different now. Thicker, darker, like they'd walked much further than they thought. He felt a pressure behind his eyes, that eerie itch of being watched, of being expected, and from behind the next row of trees, a sound, soft, a footstep. Zach and Jules both turned. There was someone there, just beyond the thinnest trees. A girl. The girl stood just beyond the trail, half shrouded by a curtain of vines, her figure lit in slivers by the streaks of strange, pale sunlight. Zach stopped walking. She wasn't facing them, at first. She stood still, back turned, arms at her sides, like someone waiting for an invisible cue. Her posture was too still, too symmetrical. Jules leaned in. Okay, either she's a ghost, a government drone, or she's about to sell us a cursed bracelet. Shut up, Zach whispered. The girl tilted her head, slowly, deliberately. Then, just as Zach started to say something, she turned around. She looked about their age, 12, maybe 13. Short-cropped black hair, sharp eyes under even sharper bangs. She wore a Camp Nevermore hoodie, but the fabric looked old, like it had been washed too many times. The logo faded almost to white. Her shorts were too clean, her skin unscuffed. Not even a mosquito bite. She looked out of sync, like she belonged to an earlier draft of this place. Hi, Jules called. You lost. She didn't move. Zach felt something clench in his chest. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, measured, oddly steady. You're not supposed to be here. Zach glanced at Jules. Jules smiled nervously. Neither are you, I guess. The girl's eyes flicked to him, then back to Zach. You shouldn't try to map it, she said, as if answering a question they hadn't asked. It doesn't like that. Jules blinked. You mean the forest? The girl didn't nod, didn't deny it. She took one small step forward. You think you're new, she said to Zach. But that's what the forest wants you to think. Zach's pulse picked up. What do you mean? You remember the wrong things, she said. You hold onto the edges. That's why it watches you. It doesn't like when things stay real for too long. Behind her, a shadow shifted in the trees, but nothing moved. No wind, no birds. You're Amber, Zach said. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. The girl's expression didn't change. You need to go back now, she said, before you forget which direction is yours. We're not lost, Jules said. We came from... He turned to point back toward the trail. There was no trail, just more trees, gnarled and thick and endless. He frowned. Okay, that's new. Zach stepped forward. Wait, just who are you really? Are you from this session? What cabin are you in? Amber tilted her head again, exactly like before. Same angle, same rhythm. I'm not in a cabin, she said. A wind passed through the trees. Just once, when Zach blinked. She was gone. No footstep, no branch snap, no sound. 1 second she was there. The next, just emptiness. Did you see? Zach started. Yeah, Jules said, turning in a slow circle. I think, unless she was never there at all, and we just shared a joint hallucination, which I really hope isn't how this ends. Zach looked back to where she'd stood. Nothing. Not even footprints. Just a tree. Its bark twisted in a pattern that looked like handwriting. He stared at it. He didn't like what he thought it said. Zach stood where Amber had been, staring at the empty space she left behind. There were no broken branches. No footprints. Just an unnatural stillness in the undergrowth, like the forest had reabsorbed her the moment she disappeared. Jules circled the clearing with a frown, eyes scanning the tree trunks. Okay, no sign of her, and also no trail, which is not great. Zach turned slowly. We just came from there, right? He pointed toward a narrow opening in the trees, maybe 10 feet away, where the ground was slightly worn. But something felt wrong about it. It wasn't the same opening. The trail they'd come down had been lined with moss and leaning pines. This path was hard-packed dirt. The trees were closer together. There were no footprints behind them, not even their own. Jules walked back a few paces, checking his notes. Hang on. I drew the fork when we passed it and the mushroom patch. It should be just back this way. Zach followed him, but as they walked, the light shifted again, ever so slightly. The sun dimmed, like a cloud passed over, but there were no clouds. The air changed, grew cooler, damp. They walked for another 30 seconds, then stopped. They were back in the same clearing. Jules looked down at his feet. Same moss, same tree, same mushroom patch, except now, one of the mushrooms had curled in on itself like it had withered, or like something had touched it. Okay, Jules said slowly. This is starting to get good and creepy. Zach's breath caught. He turned in a full circle. Everything was subtly wrong. The trees leaned at sharper angles now. The moss looked slightly darker. He was sure the rock over there had been to the left of the trail, not the right. What did she say? Jules murmured, pulling out his notebook. Something about remembering? Holding on to the right stuff. She said the forest doesn't like when things stay real, Zach said. They both went quiet. Then Jules added, do you feel like we've been here longer than we actually have? Zach opened his mouth, then hesitated. He didn't feel tired or hungry, but he also didn't feel awake. Time didn't feel gone, exactly, it just didn't feel applied. Jules kept scribbling, then paused. He held up the notebook. The trail I just drew, it loops, back into itself. Zach took the page. His heart sank. A spiral. A simple one. But the last line, the one that should have pointed back toward camp, circled inward again. Try walking 10 paces that way, Jules said, pointing. Zach obeyed. 10 paces through trees. Turned left. Then right. 10 more. And stepped back into the clearing. Again. Jules blinked at him. I think we're in a recursive map. We're in a trap. No worse. Jules pointed to the notebook again. The forest doesn't need fences. It just has to confuse you. If you don't know what direction is real, you don't know where to escape. Zach sat down on a flat rock. He looked up at the canopy. The leaves didn't sway. The light didn't move. And that's when he saw it. A second sunbeam. One to the east. One to the west. Both unmoving. Both wrong. The forest had rearranged the sky. It began subtly, so subtle Zach didn't realize it was happening until the third time they passed the same rock. Not just any rock. The rock. Shaped like a lopsided heart, flat on one side, with a streak of blue quartz veined through the top like lightning. Zach had noticed it the first time they walked past it, had even made a dumb mental note. That rock looks like it regrets its life choices. He passed it again. Did the same mental note run through his head? Or did the rock remember him? He turned to Jules. We passed that rock already. Jules nodded absently. Maybe. No. Exactly that rock. The blue stripe. I thought it looked like a broken heart that died mid-heartbeat. Jules finished. Zach stared. You thought that too? Jules squinted. I think I did. Or maybe you told me that already. Zach looked down at his feet. There, in the patch of soft dirt by the rock, were footprints. Their footprints. Too large to be a raccoon, too straight to be deer. One pair of sneaker treads with a worn sole, Zach's, and one pair of mismatched tread patterns from Jules's thrift store kicks. Only the prints weren't coming from the direction they'd just walked. They were heading toward it. From the wrong side. Like they'd already passed it. Then circled. Then passed it again? Okay, Zach said softly. We're stuck in a loop. Jules didn't answer. Zach turned. Jules was just standing there. Not looking at the rock. Not moving. Jules? Nothing. Zach waved a hand in front of his face. Jules blinked. Sorry. Zoned out. What were we talking about? You just said the thing about the broken heart. Jules blinked again. I said what? Zach took a step back. How long have we been walking? Jules looked around. I don't know. What time is it? Jules pulled out his watch. It was dead. No way, he muttered, tapping the face. Zach reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out his phone. Still no signal. The time read 3:44 p.m. Same as the bus. The exact same. He looked at the sun. Still split. Still two beams, like the sky had been printed wrong. He took out his notebook and wrote the time. Then drew the rock. Then drew the fork in the trail they had passed earlier. Then flipped 2 pages back and stared. He'd already drawn the rock. Twice. Different pages. Different loops. Same drawing. Same date. Same pen pressure. Jules was pacing now, muttering to himself. We went left, right, then curved. No, we went north. I think we passed the mushroom patch. Wait, did we ever leave that patch? He turned to Zach. Why did we come out here? Zach narrowed his eyes. What? Why did we come out here? Jules repeated. What were we trying to find? Zach felt cold all over. Amber, the girl. Who? Zach stepped forward. Amber. She warned us. You talked to her. Jules blinked hard. I don't. What are you talking about? You asked her if she was a ghost or a government drone. I never said that. Zach grabbed his notebook, flipped to the page with Amber's name. Gone. Blank. Just a half-finished doodle of a tree and a note about possible memory distortion events. No, Zach said. No, no, no. Jules frowned. Zach, you're freaking out. Zach held up the notebook. You were there. You talked to her. Her name was Amber. She told us. I don't remember her. You're lying. I'm not. Zach turned, walked away, breathing fast, scanning the trees, looking for anything real. A sign. A break in the branches. A noise. Instead, he found another set of footprints. Theirs. Again. Coming from a direction they hadn't walked. Leading toward a tree split with a scar across its middle, like it had been struck by lightning from the inside, and carved into the bark. Go back before you forget why. Zach reached for the notebook again. His hands were shaking. He pressed the pen hard into the paper and wrote, My name is Zach. My friend is Jules. We're lost. The forest is looping us. Memory is breaking. Don't trust time. Remember Amber. He closed the notebook and held it like a tether. Jules was sitting down now, back against a tree, staring at his own hands. Hey, Zach, he said quietly. What day is it? Zach swallowed. He didn't know anymore. The tree was wrong. Zach saw it before he understood what he was looking at. Just a dark shape between the trunks ahead, a bulge in the landscape that didn't belong. They moved toward it without speaking. Even Jules was silent now, his jokes long gone, his eyes dull with something Zach didn't like. Fear that was setting in too late. The closer they got, the more impossible it became. It was massive. A tree taller than any they'd seen in the forest so far. Its bark blackened and split like a lightning strike had once cracked it in half, but the trunk hadn't fallen. It had opened. A hollow interior yawned within, wide enough for 3 people to stand inside. Maybe more. The bark curled inward like the ribcage of something long dead. The air around it was folded, still, and inside the hollow, carved into every visible surface of the wood, were names. Names on top of names, layered and frantic, not neatly etched, not labeled with bunk numbers or hearts or dates. These were gouged, scratched, clawed in with fingernails, with rocks, with rusted bits of metal and broken pencils. Some were crossed out. Some were upside down. Some were written backwards. Eric, NIA. Jordan 1981. Yell AL AL AL. Help me, I forgot who I am. Zachary M. Jules A. Still here, still here, still. Zach's breath left him in one long exhale. He stepped into the hollow. Inside, the air was dry, thick with the sharp smell of burned sap and old rock. The silence was louder in here, like the walls were listening. He reached out and touched the wood. It pulsed faintly beneath his fingertips. Alive, or trying to be. Jules followed him in, slow, like someone walking into a dream they weren't ready to wake up from. He stopped suddenly, pointed. There it was. Jules Avery, 2023. Scratched high, near a knot in the wood. Jagged, fresh. Jules stepped back. No, he said quietly. No, I didn't, I never. I didn't write that. He turned to leave. Zach caught his arm. You're not going to forget this. I already am. Jules snapped. You're holding it together now, but I'm not, okay? I'm slipping. I forgot what we ate for breakfast. I forgot what day it is. I forgot my cabin number. We've only been here 2 days. He pressed his fists to his temples. This place is messing with my head. Zach looked back at the walls. All those names. All those people. He wondered how many had been remembered. How many had ever been real. And then he heard it. A sound from outside. A rustle, then a snap. Both boys froze. Another step. Heavy. Something was moving through the trees. Zach didn't wait. He grabbed Jules and yanked him out of the hollow. They ran. No direction. Just away. Branches slapped at their arms. Roots caught their shoes. The trees blurred. The air grew thin. But they ran and ran and ran until suddenly they weren't in the forest anymore. They stumbled into a wide clearing, skidding to a stop on the patchy grass behind the mess hall. Camp Nevermore stood before them. The cabins, the flagpole, the distant ping of a bell for afternoon announcements. Normal, quiet, safe-looking. They both turned, panting, sweat running down their necks. Behind them, just trees. No trail, no rock, no hollow, no sign they'd ever been anywhere but right here. And then Jules said, "What trail?" Chapter 4. Campers Who Forget. The mess hall bell clanged again, sharp and cheerful, echoing across Camp Nevermore like nothing strange had ever happened. Zach and Jules stood at the edge of the clearing for a long moment, breathing hard, covered in pine needles and dirt. The smell of something fried wafted toward them from the kitchen vents. Grease and baked cheese and overly sweet lemonade. And for a second, it was dizzying. The normalcy of it. Too normal. It felt staged. A backdrop for a play no one was watching anymore. Zach looked at Jules. We should tell someone. Jules was staring at the mess hall windows like he was trying to solve a math problem he'd already given up on. Tell them what? That the forest ate our sense of time and showed us a tree full of names, including ours, and then spat us back out behind the building. Yes. Great. Let's report that to the haunted counselors and see how fast we get institutionalized. Zach sighed. Fine. But look at us. We were gone. For hours. Someone had to notice. They crossed the clearing slowly. No one looked up. A group of kids played hacky sack by the flagpole. One of them dropped the sack twice in a row and kept apologizing. Not to the others, but to the sack itself. At cabin 2, a girl stood completely still on the porch, staring at the woods. Her hands twitched occasionally, like she was squeezing invisible snowballs. As they passed cabin 4, a counselor smiled and waved at them. How are you boys enjoying free time? Zach stopped. The counselors didn't blink. Zach opened his mouth, closed it. They moved on. The mess hall doors opened with a heavy creak. Inside, everything buzzed with cafeteria noise. Trays clattering, kids laughing, spoons scraping bowls. Zach stood just inside the doorway. His own name echoed in his mind. Zach N., 1974. The hollow tree. The names. The loop. And now this. This return. Too easy. Too quiet. They slid into the lunch line like nothing had happened. The food was the same strange comfort, mix of nostalgia and neon. Grilled cheese squares that squeaked when bitten, tater tots with the consistency of foam, and that overly yellow lemonade that didn't so much quench thirst as confuse it. Zach carried his tray to the long table by the window. Across the room, one of the counselors, Reed, or one of the interchangeable others, sat smiling at the campers, eyes glassy. Zach watched a kid spill juice on the floor. Another camper walked through the puddle without reacting. A third kept stirring his mashed potatoes without ever eating. Something's wrong with them, Zach said. Jules popped a tot in his mouth. Something's always been wrong with them. No, I mean it's worse. They're slow, dull. It's like they're forgetting everything. Or we're just remembering too much. Zach glanced around again. If they had been missing for hours, there should have been questions. Suspicion. A head count. Something. Instead, the world had carried on like their absence didn't exist. Like they didn't. He looked down at his plate. The lemonade jiggled like gelatin. He didn't drink it. The mess hall was built like a barn someone once loved. High-beam ceilings. Long wooden tables. Walls covered in painted signs like "We Stick Together" and "Never Less, Nevermore." There were mounted animal heads over the fireplace. Plastic, shiny eyes, grinning too wide. A deer with eyes that followed you when you moved. Zach wandered away from the table. The lemonade sat untouched. He drifted past the kitchen window, where trays clattered and someone hummed tunelessly. Past the empty trophy case, no labels, just cobwebs. Toward the back wall, where the air smelled faintly of old varnish and photo paper. There, arranged in uneven rows and cheap wood frames, hung the Camp Nevermore yearly camper photos. Black and white, then faded color, then glossy full-color prints from the last few decades. Each photo showed a group of kids, lined up by height, mid-laugh, mid-blink, arms around each other. Counselors stiff and smiling behind them like backup dancers in old military uniforms. Zach scanned them absently, until he saw it. Third row, far left, the 1965 photo. Zach leaned in. It was labeled in curling, handwritten ink. Camp Nevermore, Session C, Summer 65. About 30 campers stood posed in front of the mess hall porch, half smiling, half staring blankly, some blurred by motion. Their outfits were old, short shorts, tucked tees, bandanas. Vintage before vintage was cool. And there, standing in the back row, Jules. Not someone who looked like Jules. Jules. Same hair, same glasses, same slouching posture and slight, smug smile. Same face. Label under the photo read, Jules Avery, Cabin 3. Zach stepped back like the frame had just burned him. He stared again. Still there. He turned and waved urgently. Jules. Hey, come here. Jules wandered over, still chewing something. What? Zach pointed. That. Tell me that's not you. Jules squinted at the photo, then frowned, then leaned closer. He stared for a long moment, too long, then said, Huh, that's all you've got? I mean, it's weird, yeah. It's you, with your name, in 1965. Jules snorted softly. Okay, yeah, that's messed up. Maybe someone in my family looks exactly like me. Maybe the camp recycles names. Maybe they're really good at Photoshop. In 1965. Okay, maybe they invented Photoshop. You don't know. Zach grabbed his arm. You've been here before. No, I haven't. Zach pointed again. Then why do you look scared? Jules opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the photo one more time, then said, too casually, maybe we should go sit down. He turned and walked away. Zach didn't follow. He just stared at the photo and wondered what else the wall might remember that Jules didn't. Zach glanced around. The mess hall was still humming. Counselors chatting, campers eating, chairs scraping on old wood. No one watching. No one noticing. He turned back to the photo. His fingers hesitated at the frame. It was old, cheap wood, splintered at the corners. A bit of twine stretched between two nails held it loosely in place. He reached up, slid it free. The wall behind was slightly darker. The shape of the frame burned in by time and dust. He carried it carefully back to the table and sat. Jules was staring blankly at a puddle of lemonade on his tray. Zach set the frame down with a quiet thud. "What now?" Jules asked, not even looking. Zach flipped it over. The back panel was thin cardboard held in place with little metal tacks. He pried them up with the edge of a fork, one by one. Then he slid the photo free. The back was plain at first, off-white, textured. Then he turned it slightly, angled it against the light. Words, in blue ink, faded but still legible, written in crooked, slanting lines. "Don't let me forget. Not again." Zach's throat tightened. He pulled out his notebook, flipped to the last page, where Jules had written something during their forest week. Held the photo beside it. The handwriting matched. Same pressure, same slant, same habit of not crossing his T's. He set both down and looked at Jules. Jules wasn't smiling anymore. He stared at the photo for a long moment. His jaw moved slightly, but no words came out. Zach whispered, "You wrote this. You were here. You've been here." Jules blinked slowly. "No, I haven't. You." "I haven't." Jules's voice was flat, too fast, too rehearsed. Zach leaned in. "How can you look at this and not feel anything?" Jules looked at the table. "Because if I do, I won't come back. That's what it feels like." Zach stared at him. "What?" Jules's voice was quieter now. "I feel it. Something slipping. The more I focus, the more the edges blur. Like the harder I try to remember, the faster it gets away." Zach sat back. He looked at the photo again. The ink on the back seemed darker now, like it had freshened since they read it. Like the message wanted to be seen again, or needed to be remembered. Zach laid the photo flat between them, the inked message still visible beneath the yellow overhead lights of the mess hall. It should have changed everything, but Jules just sat there, chewing slowly, his expression unreadable. "Say something," Zach said. Jules blinked, looked up. "It's weird. Weird," Zach hissed. "You wrote this. You're in the photo. That's your face. Your name. This isn't just weird, Jules. It's proof." Jules shrugged. That was it. No shock. No denial. Not even sarcasm. Just that slow, worn-out shrug. Like someone who'd lost the energy to pretend anything mattered. Zach leaned in closer. "Do you remember writing that?" Jules stared at him for a long second, then reached across the table and turned the photo face down again. "Stop." "What?" "Just stop, okay?" Zach's voice rose. "You were here. You left yourself a message. That means this has happened before. It means the forest wants you to forget." "I know," Jules snapped. The room quieted slightly around them. Jules lowered his voice. "I know. I know something's wrong. I feel it every time I try to think about before camp. I can't remember what month it is. I don't know how long we've been here. He stopped, pressing a hand over his eyes. "It's like trying to hold water in a sieve. The harder I squeeze, the less I keep." Zach looked down at the photo. The boy in it had Jules's exact smirk. The date underneath read, 1965. Jules continued, voice dull now. "Maybe it's not even the forest. Maybe it's the camp, or the lake, or something in the food. I don't know, but if I keep chasing it, if I try to dig too deep, I feel this pull, like something wants me hollow. Zach swallowed. He reached for his notebook again and wrote. Jules is forgetting, not faking, not scared, just unraveling. Across from him, Jules quietly added, so maybe we stop trying to explain it. Maybe we just play along. Stay low, stay small, don't make noise. Zach shook his head. That's how it wins. Wins what? Jules said. I don't even remember what we're fighting. Zach stared at his friend. Jules looked fine, healthy, unbothered. But behind his eyes, something was peeling away, layer by layer, and Zach could feel it starting in himself too. Not yet, but soon. If he didn't fight it, that night, the rain came, soft at first, a whisper against the tin roof of cabin 3, then steadier, like the sky was trying to wash something away. Zach lay awake in the bottom bunk, blanket pushed to his knees, the photo clutched in one hand, his flashlight in the other. Jules was asleep above him, snoring gently. Sounded normal. Everything always sounded normal, right until it didn't. The photo didn't belong here. Zach held it under the beam of his flashlight, tilted just so. The boy in the picture smiled back, thinner than Jules is now, a little younger maybe, with the same crooked glasses, same smirk that always came before a joke, the same shadow behind the eyes. He flipped it over again. Don't let me forget. Not again. His fingers traced the letters. They looked fresher now, even though the ink was smudged. Something inside him whispered that he shouldn't keep it, that looking at it too long was a kind of invitation. But he couldn't stop. The paper grew warmer. He shifted under the covers. Now it was hot. Zach sat up fully and looked again. The ink was changing, fading at the edges, then curling. The paper curled slowly, like a dead leaf, the corners blackening, not in flame, but in silence. No smoke, no smell, just sudden heat and a slow disintegration. Zach dropped it onto the floor. It continued curling inward like it had always been waiting to collapse. The back darkened first, and just as the message faded entirely, new ink surfaced. Just for a breath of a moment, thick and black and final. You're next. Zach flinched. The photo was gone. Ash. No, not even ash. Just a black flake, lighter than dust, that vanished before it hit the floor. He sat there for a long time, breathing hard. He didn't dare wake Jules. Outside, the rain thickened. And then, so faint he almost missed it. Just beneath the sound of water and wind and creaking branches, a voice, soft, low, from right behind the cabin wall. Soft.